Hi guys, it's Rishmina and welcome back to the Peppy podcast. Welcome. Today we have with us Gary Sprouse, a medical doctor from the US who used to be a primary care physician. Welcome, Gary.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Rashmi, and I really appreciate this. And I'm really hoping that today that we're going to help at least one person in your audience have less stress.
That person is me.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Well, then we'll work on you. That's good.
Okay, and let's start by finding out a little bit about how you switched careers and moved from being a physician to being a stress doctor.
Yeah, right. So here's the cool thing that my job as a physician was to make sure people were healthier and happier. So what happened when I retired being a physician, I have the same job. My job is to make people healthier and happier. I just changed tools. So before I was using prescription pads and stethoscopes, and now I use a book and I use a seminar. So same process. But what changed though, and this is the interesting part to me, was that as a medical doctor, you're trained in how to prescribe and how to diagnose and do testing and what medicines to use. But one of the things that I realized is that a lot of patients were coming in with their stress related problems that were affecting their medical problems. So their blood pressure was worse, their stomach symptoms are worse, the asthma was worse. And so as I started dealing with their psychological stresses, I looked up this one study, and here's what it said: that as a primary care doctor, if I send somebody to a psychologist, there's a 75% chance that they're not going to go. And I'm like, wait, what? And so it turns out there's stigma and money and insurances and time. And so I was like, so if I send somebody, I go, I'm either going to realize there's a 75% chance they're not going to go, or I could just do it myself. And so what I decided was to start learning to do this stuff myself. And it came up with this new model for how the brain works. And that led me to the insights that allowed me to be more helpful psychologically. So then I became a holistic doctor. And when the first person called me that, I'm like, wait, what? What is that? And I'm like, oh, right, because now I have the medicine training, but now I have the psychological training. And so now I can combine the two, and it makes a much more efficient way to help take care of patients.
And can you tell me what's the level of stress you see amongst your patients? What percentage of them appear stressed to you?
Well, here's what I've been seeing in the world is that the level of stress over the last 50, 60, 70, 100 years has been steadily going up, which doesn't make any sense. Like our world has gotten so much better. Why are we under so much stress? This doesn't even make sense.
And would you say if people weren't watching things such as war and bad news on TV, on the internet, would you say they'd be less stressed, or do you think they'd still be overstimulated because we're just constantly bombarded with information?
Yeah, well, so first off, it's hard to not watch all that stuff. And here's why. Because as humans, we're set up to watch for dangerous stuff. So we might want to like hear a story about some guy's 100th birthday or some other, somebody, some little kid that did something fancy. But we need to watch about something dangerous. And the news media has figured that out. So they give us what we need. They give us what we'll click to watch. So if somebody's got a video on a war scene, like they get way more clicks than the 100th birthday party. Because as humans, our brains are set up to say, oh no, we need to watch that because I need to know if there's something out there that's dangerous that I need to pay attention to.
And how do you think being stressed affects someone's functioning and their cognition, their attention span, their performance at work?
Yeah, wow. So there's a book that I read called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And it's a great title, right?
Okay.
And here's the answer, right? So zebras, if they're eating grass and they sniff a lion, they're like, ah, lion, and they start running away. But as soon as they can't sniff the lion anymore, they go back and they're eating grass and they're fine. For humans, we might be eating dinner and all of a sudden there's a bear outside of our door and we're like, ah, it's a bear, right? But then, like after the bear goes away, 5 minutes later, we're like, oh, what if the bear came back? What if my kid was outside when the bear showed up? What if I hurt my leg and I couldn't run away? So we can think about a bear showing up forever and there's nothing to make it stop. And that's what this guy was talking about is like, we now have fear reactions to things that don't exist. They're
Mm.
just ideas, they're just concepts in our head. And there's nothing to make them stop. They can go on and on and on and on. So our bodies were set up to have a fear reaction and run away from a bear or a lion. But once you got away, it was supposed to turn off. And the problem we've gotten into is it doesn't turn off. So think about if you were driving your car will go 120 miles an hour or whatever, 150 kilometers an hour, right? But after a while, it starts breaking down. And that's what happens to our bodies. We can run our bodies really fast for a long time, but eventually they start breaking down. And so in his book, 300 pages on all the things that can happen to you because of stress. There's stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol. And what they do is they affect your lungs, they affect your immune system, they affect your skin, they affect your brain. So one of the things that happens when you have a fear reaction, you literally turn off the thinking part of your brain. So you're not really thinking at the time, you're just getting away. And so when you can't think, well, then bad things can happen because it's like you run out in the street and you forget to look both ways, right? That kind of stuff. What I see then, you have to physiological reactions. And that was what I got to see as a doctor. Your blood pressure goes up, your pulse goes up, you're more likely to have a heart attack, your immune system is down, so you're more likely to get an infection. Those are all the things that happen to us, and that's the reason I try to have like stress.
How do you go about advising people to manage their stress better? What's the number one change you ask people to make?
Okay, so the first thing I tell people is you can't get rid of stress.
Mm,
And here's why. Because stress, this is my definition of stress. Stress is us dealing with our changing environment
mhm.
with our changing body. So our environment's always changing, but so are we always changing. And so there's always this adaptation between us and our environment. So that is stress. So that's stress is going to be there until you die. And then you don't have to deal with it anymore, right? But as long as you're alive, there's going to be stress. So the key then is how do you manage stress most effectively? And that leads me to, well, like, where's most of our stress is coming from? The majority of people think of their stress as external, like there was a storm or I was in a car accident or some guy was being rude to me. But no, it really has to do with us and how we react to our environment. So we have way more control than we think. Okay. But then the second thing is we have all these skills that get us into trouble. So here's the example. So if you took a newborn, a baby, let's make it 3 days old, right? So they got an umbilical cord that's tied off and hanging out of their belly. Like, does their self-esteem take a hit because they got this thing hanging out of their belly? No, right? Do they feel guilty that they woke their parents up at 3 in the morning crying? No, right? Do they worry about who's going to college? No. So why can babies be so less stressed, right? So it turns out all those things that we consider stressful, worry, guilt, dread, being overwhelmed, are side effects to our skills. So babies don't have our skills yet. It's as they get older, and then they start getting the skills, and guess what? Then they end up with more stress. And so what you'll hear, the advice that you get is, well, just live for today. And you're like, well, that's awesome advice because if you do that, that's what my 1-year-old grandson does. He lives for today. He doesn't worry about it. He doesn't even have tomorrow, right? So he's real happy, not very successful, right? So he needs parents to keep track of him and make sure he doesn't get into trouble. So as a human, it's literally impossible not to have future. So what I talk about is saying, look, let's keep your future. So let's keep the skill of being able to envision the future. Let's get rid of the side effect of worrying about it. And that goes for guilt and regret and being overwhelmed and your self-esteem. All these things are side effects to the skills that we have.
What do you think is a way stress sort of shows up in our lives in ways we don't even realize?
Oh, well, interesting that you bring that up. So there's this term that I came up with, and I call it stress blindness.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't know if you've ever heard of nose blindness, but this is the lady who has 50 cats, and you walk into your house, you're like, whoa, what does that smell, right? And the lady looks at you like, what smell?
Exactly.
Exactly, right? Because she's gotten so used to it that she doesn't even pay attention to it anymore. Okay. It's not the stresses that are good or bad, it's how you respond to it that makes it good or bad.
How can we respond to stress in a healthy way that can help us grow and perform to our highest potential?
Yeah, that's a nice thought, right? So one of the keys is mindset. So mindset really makes a difference. So there's another book that I'd written called Mindset Matters with Jack Canfield and some other authors. And got involved in that book because mindset makes such a big difference. So I use this one story where an 18-year-old breaks his ankle. And his father's all upset. Oh, I can't believe you broke your ankle. How are you going to help me with the farm? Blah, blah, blah. And he's all upset about it. But then the next day, a recruiter for the war machine comes and says, hey, we need your 18-year-old son to fight for us. And you're like, oh, well, he broke his ankle. And they're like, oh, well, then he can't fight for him. So this thing that was so horrible the day before now it's like a really good thing because it kept him out of the war, right? So sometimes we just need a perspective to go, oh, this looks bad right now, but in the end, it turned out to be a really good thing. Seeing things as a problem that can be overcome, not an insurmountable obstacle that's just there and in your way, right? There's a thing called a growth mindset, and that's what it talks about. So seeing things as problems that are solvable, seeing things that as you're trying to learn a new skill, everything doesn't go right in the beginning, and there's going to be some things that don't go well, but you're going to get better and better as you keep doing it, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I just can't do it, quit, and stop." Right. So having that kind of mindset makes a huge difference, and so that is something I can do about it. And so then I would turn to the book and go, "Okay, here's worry. Here's how to worry less. Here's guilt. Here's how to feel less guilt. Here's how to regret, and here's how." Right. So then as you go through it step by step, then what you see is the stress level goes down by these individual pieces.
And do you have any ways that we can make our brain sort of stop when it's worrying on repeat, when it's just
That
worrying and worrying and worrying?
sounds like a personal question. Yeah, okay, let's see. So here's what I find. So worry. So if I said to you, tell me what worry is, what would you say?
Um, I think I'm worried or stressed by uncertainty when
Okay.
I feel like I don't have control, when I feel like something bad might happen, and then my brain starts to spiral a little bit.
Okay. So now let me give you my definition. So here's the definition of worry. So worry is envisioning the future, right? This is our incredible skill.
Mhm.
But then focusing on all the bad things that can happen, the what ifs, as you just said, right? All these bad things, which then, and this is the most important part, then gives you a fear reaction right now. So
Mm.
in the future, looking at all the bad things, the what ifs, and then having a fear reaction right now. And it can be from a mild anxiety to a full blown panic attack, depending on your response, right? So if that's the definition of worry, so what can we do? So first off, grateful that we're smart enough to have a future. Yay, good stuff, right? Two, we have the ability to choose. So we can focus on all the bad things that can happen, or we can focus on all the good things that can happen. So when I was writing my book, I could focus on I'll never finish the book. No one's ever going to read it. It's not going to help anybody. Guess what that makes me feel? That makes me feel horrible, which makes me not want to write the book. Or I could say, hey, this book's going to be great. I'm going to be in the Peppy podcast. And I'm going to be helping all these people. Yay, right? Which then makes me want to write the book and finish, right? So I focused on the good stuff, which then allowed me the effort to do it. In my book, I talked about a worry organizer. So I just went through this with a patient of mine. She's 18 years old. She'd been sick for a couple of weeks and had been out of school. And now she didn't want to go back to school. She goes, I don't want to go back because everybody's sick and I'm just going to get sick again and now I'm going to be worse, right? So she was worried, right? So then I go, okay, but it was that 2 o'clock in the morning, winding up, having panic attacks. It was giving her an ulcer, right? So we sat down and did a worry organizer. So here's the columns. First one, what are you worried about? Well, I'm worried that I'm going to go back to school and get sick. You're like, why are you worried about that? Well, I just got sick, and I just heard that all the schools have all this illness running around. So that makes it more likely that I'm going to get sick. And I'm like, well, okay. These are most true statements, right? And then the third comment is, well, how likely is it that you're going to get sick? And how bad would it be if you did? So she thought for a second and says, well, maybe it's 50% likely. And I go, that's a pretty good option, right? So that means there's a 50% chance you're going to get sick, but there's a 50% chance you won't. And I go, and even if you got sick, how bad would it be? She goes, well, you know what? You're probably right. There's probably 90% chance this is going to be a cold and it's just going to go away in a couple of days. But there's a 10% chance I could get, sick and get pneumonia or something like that. And you're like, okay, I'll give you that. But now, okay, so then the next step is, well, what do you do to not do it, right? What do you do to not get sick? And she goes, well, I can wear a mask. I can take some medicines. I can increase my vitamin C. I can minimize my connections with people, right? And the last column is, well, what would you do if you got sick? And you're like, oh, well, no, I'd take my over-the-counter medicine, or go to the walk-in center, or I'd go to the emergency room if I got really sick. So you're like, once you wrote it all out, then I was like, so if you don't go to school on Monday, do you think those things are going to change if you wait a week? And she's like, no, not really. I'm like, so then why wait? Like, go Monday, right? Because if it's not really going to change, then just go, right? So, and is there something else you could do? Like, oh, it turns out you could do this, airborne, which helps you prevent getting from sick, blah blah blah. So it's like, as you make this list out, now instead of you having to have half your brain remember what it is you're supposed to worry about, now all of your brain is just problem solving, and you have it on a piece of paper, so you can show it to your doctor, or you can show it to your mom, or you can show it to your friend. And you go, "Hey, can you add anything to this?" So that when you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, your brain's running around. You can go, "Hey," you look at your sheet and go, "Do I have anything to add?" That no, and then go back to sleep, right? So that worry organizer becomes a way for you to think about all the different problems that you have and get it under control and plan. Here's the key. So now I'm going to keep my future. I'm going to plan, but without fear. And that's what we did with the 18-year-old, right? So now instead of being afraid to go to school, she's like, oh, it's a 50% chance I'll get sick, but a 90% chance it'll be fine. I'll just get better and go away. Versus, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. So the other thing that the other tool I gave is what ifs, right? So there's a book I read called The Worry Trick, which is a stupid title, by the way, but the book was good. And what he said is you can't turn your brain off. Because if I said to you don't think of an elephant, the first thing you do is think of an elephant, right?
Mhm.
So what he said is instead of trying, like the more you go, don't be afraid, you can do this, right? The more you have to think about it, which is not good, right? So what he talks about is being a surfer and you're surfing the waves. So you're up on top riding these waves and oh there's a what if, oh there's a what if, there's a good thing. So what he said is that when we're doing that surfing, when we see something bad, we stop and go, what? That bad thing, and then you start reacting to the bad thing and you forget all the other stuff. But what he said is just keep looking, there's a bad one, oh there's a good one, oh there's a right. Because if you just go, oh there's a bad thought, that doesn't set you off. It's when you go stop and you start thinking about the bad thought, then it sets off the fear reaction. Like, what if that happened? Ah, right. So when you realize that just a thought, all your thoughts are going to be rolling around like waves. Your job as a surfer is just kind of sit on top and see them. Yeah, yeah, there's one. Oh, yeah, there's another. In our brain, there's a thing called the amygdala, and and it triggers our awareness and our attention, and it also has to do with our fear. And here's my thinking: is that some people's amygdala is bigger than someone else's, or that it's more reactive than someone else's. So if you have an amygdala that reacts as a 1, man, life is going to be pretty easy. If you have an amygdala that reacts at a 10, what? Yeah, that gets people into trouble because now you're having panic attacks every time something happens. So that makes life a lot more difficult when your amygdala is overreactive. There's a social component to it because if you watch your mom freak out all the time, well, then you're going to be more likely to freak out all the time because you've watched your mom, how she reacts, and you're learning from her how to react. And so those two combine so that people can then start having bigger reactions to even smaller things. So one of my jobs then is to deal. So I don't get many people that come in that react with 1s because they're like, fine, I don't have any problems, right? What I get are the people that are coming in reacting with 10s because it gets them into trouble. Because if you're reacting to a 10, then you have to more often do something to reduce your stress, and you have to use stronger things. And so what you see is somebody that a cocktail at night is enough to get them calmed down, good enough for them, right? But somebody's reacting with a 10, they need 5 cocktails. That's not enough. They need marijuana. That's not enough. They need heroin. Oh, that might work, right? But then what you see is you increase the strength of the stress reducer, then you start getting into more and more trouble. And there's a model that I've been using to describe addiction. And what I've been finding is calling it a disease has been counterproductive. It's not helping. So we're doing all this. We have all these smart people. We have all this money, and we have very motivated patients, and we're getting a 20% success rate. And you're like, what is wrong with that? So what I do is I say, look, people are in what I call a stress reducer loop. So that means the stress reducer that you pick to reduce your stress is now a stress producer. So now your reducer is causing stress, which then makes you use it more, which then gives more stress. And now you're in this loop. So it's a stress reducer loop. And so anybody can end up in a loop if you give them enough stress, or anything that people do to reduce their stress can become a loop. And so what I say to them is like, you're normal. You had stress. You found something that worked. But then the thing you found started causing side effects. It started producing stress. And so now you got to get out. But your brain has made it an automatic trap, habit, track, whatever. So when you try to stop that, it's really hard. And so I'm going to help you make new tracks and I'm going to teach you how to have less stress. And then you won't need that anymore. How nice would that be? And then the stigma goes away. We ostracize these people goes away.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us about tips to cope with stress better today?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found is that patients are getting overwhelmed. So they combine their worry and their guilt and their regret and all the things they have to do in the day. Like one of my friends called me yesterday and she's like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. She's calling me and she's like, I'm exhausted. I'm like, wait, what? It's 8 o'clock in the morning. What's up? She goes, I got this to do and that to do and this to do. Oh yeah, and I forgot I got this too and that. I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. You haven't even done any of those things yet. What? It's like, and that's what people do is they stress themselves out and they get overwhelmed. And what they do is, here's the word I use, they lump. So if you find yourself lumping, stop a second, right? So lumping is, I got this problem and this problem and this problem and this problem, that problem, right? And when you got this whole big lump, you have no place to get started. You're overwhelmed. You don't know where you can go, right? So my answer is to de-lump, okay? So how do you de-lump? So the technical term is compartmentalization. But what I'm going to tell you is shoe boxes. Okay. So what I want you, when you find yourself lumping, I want you to think shoe boxes. Okay. So if you walk in a bedroom and there's 100 shoe boxes and the bottom's here and the lid's there and the right shoe's here and the left shoe's over here and you got 100 of them and they're all over the place, you walk in going, I don't even know where to get started. Right? Okay, but if you walk into the same room and you got the bottom and the two shoes are inside and the lid's on top and they're all stored in the closet and they're all nice and neat, and now you take one shoe box and you look at it and you put it back up, that's not overwhelming. It's a lot of shoe boxes, a lot of problems, but it's not overwhelming. Now, sometimes some of these problems are connected, and I'll give you that. But the more separate you keep them, the more compartmentalized you are, the more you keep shoe boxes, then the less overwhelmed you get. And it's a pretty cool thing to do.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today?
The last thing I say to people is, okay, I'm listening to you, audience. Do not resign yourself to being overwhelmed or being stressed out. It doesn't have to be like that. There are answers out there. My book's one of the answers. Highway to Your Happy Place, Roadmap to Less Stress. Get it, read it, do something. Don't live your life stressed out. It doesn't have to be like that. But you do have to do something. You do have to read a book or you have to change something. If you want a new outcome, you got to put some different input in. But it's possible. So just keep that in mind.
Thank you so much, Gary.
Well, thank you for having me on. This has been great.